Within this module, we will explore the record-keeping requirements for any effective safety program. Once completed with this module, you should be able to discuss the various types of record-keeping needed for a safety program, explain how to maintain the various records required by your service's safety program, and identify the requirements of record-keeping for a safety program. The introductory scenario in this chapter has your training chief asking you about record-keeping. Your service was just audited by the state and does not have a record-keeping program for the trainings provided internally to the services providers. You do not have a great deal of familiarity with record-keeping requirements and realize you will have to research the topic to determine what the requirements are. Do you believe there are resources available through OSHA or, within Wisconsin, the Department of Safety and Professional Services? What other resources are available to assist in your research? Are you familiar with the specific elements that must be addressed within your training program documentation? Simply stated, your service must ensure proper records are maintained to comply with federal, state, and possibly local laws and regulations. Not to be oversimplistic, but EMS services must commonly document everything they do, and those records must be filed and maintained appropriately. Again, record keeping is a critical component of any EMS organization's safety program. Various pieces of documentation, such as policy statements, training sessions, safety meetings, safety information distributed to personnel, and medical documentation related to safety factors, such as injury reports, must be maintained by the organization. Records related to safety and health of your personnel must be maintained. This includes injury and illness records, injury reports, and infectious disease exposures. It is also important to recognize that your personnel typically have certain privacy rights, and the maintenance of these documents may need to be protected with limited access as personnel medical information is protected, yet may be included within these various records. If an employee has a positive TB test, OSHA has special reporting requirements under Section 1904.11. Additionally, because EMS personnel should have access to N95 masks and those masks require fit testing, documentation of proper fit testing must be available if the service is ever audited. The legal course within the WCTC EMS Leadership and Management Technical Diploma program goes into more depth regarding OSHA's applicability to EMS providers. Within Wisconsin, public employees do not fall under OSHA. Rather, workplace safety and health regulations are enforced by the Department of Safety and Professional Services. With that being said, many of the same OSHA regulations are adopted and enforced within Wisconsin through the DSPS. Additional documentation beyond employee safety and health, although arguably related, is documentation of any incidents or accidents that resulted in property damage, even if no one was injured as a result. OSHA has special reporting requirements for injuries as defined within Section 1904.29 Subpart C. Information related to employee injuries or illnesses must be recorded on OSHA 300, 300A, and 301 forms or an equivalent. One of the purposes of the OSHA 300 log is to track lost work days as a result of death, injury, restricted work, or other criteria. These lost work days can include not only days away from duty, but also includes the days of restricted or transferred duty. These restricted or transferred work cases are included on the OSHA 300 log because OSHA has found that information useful in evaluating workplace safety and health, especially in light of employers who would previously use restricted work assignments rather than having an employee completely off work to avoid having to include the injury on their OSHA 300 log. OSHA also requires records to be maintained on the exposure of personnel to toxic or hazardous substances. Keep in mind that while these reports are required to be maintained by OSHA, there may be other entities or regulatory agencies that also require the same documentation, even if OSHA does not regulate safety and health for your specific service. If you would prefer, there are third-party software solutions available to assist services in maintaining these records. Infectious disease exposure is a unique subset of safety and health record keeping because it often involves confidentiality issues for the employee or a third party, yet the law may have special reporting requirements or mandate other action to prevent the spread of a communicable disease. In addition to the provisions within Section 1904.8 of OSHA's Regulation on Infectious Diseases, 1910.1030 has requirements related to the record keeping of infectious disease exposures. Even if no exposure occurred, employers are required to maintain a copy of the employee's hepatitis B vaccination status. Given an exposure, copies of examinations, medical testing, or follow-up procedures must be maintained, along with the information provided to healthcare professionals and any written opinion from the healthcare professional. Again, confidentiality of employee records is maintained unless the disclosure is required by law. All of these records must be maintained by the organization for 30 years after the employee leaves the organization. OSHA requires annual bloodborne pathogen training, and the organization must maintain training records that include the dates of the training sessions, lesson plans, professional information related to those who provided the training, such as a resume or curriculum vitae, and a list of all those who attended. Such training records must be maintained for a minimum of 3 years from the date of the training. If the organization goes bankrupt, stops conducting business, closes its doors, or otherwise ceases to exist, those employee records must be transferred appropriately to another party within 3 months of the organization's demise. If such a circumstance were to arise within your organization, OSHA or an appropriate state agency, such as the DSPS in Wisconsin, must be contacted to receive directions on how to handle that transfer of paperwork. Lastly, being an EMS organization, it is mandated that a SHARPS injury log be maintained to track the type and brand of device involved in the incident, the department or work area where the exposure incident occurred, and the explanation of how the incident occurred. Beyond safety and health-related issues, EMS organizations must also adequately document any training provided to their providers. Not only is this documentation required by licensing bodies and certification entities, in the event of a lawsuit related to the care provided by the service, you can be rest assured that the organization's training records will be subpoenaed. These training records should include the dates of training sessions, an outline of what was covered or a lesson plan, the names and qualifications of the individuals conducting the training, the information related to who attended the training, and copies of training evaluations. OSHA mandates that these records be maintained for a minimum period of 3 years from the date of the training. Aside from OSHA, the National Fire Protection Association also publishes NFPA 1401, Recommended Practice for Fire Service Training Reports and Records. While not directly related to standalone EMS agencies, the standard does identify 5 specific elements that should be documented for any training: who, what, when, where, and why. Who was the instructor? Who were the participants? Who attended? Who was affected by the documents? What subject was covered? What equipment was utilized? What operation was evaluated or affected? What was the stated objectives for the training and were they met? When did the training take place? Where did the training occur? Why was this training necessary? That information should all be documented for each training provided by the EMS agency for its personnel. As discussed earlier in this course, safety audits are conducted to ensure an organization is carrying out its mission in the safest manner possible. Because various stakeholders may need to see proof of your safety audits, such as an insurance carrier, proper documentation of safety audits is required. While there is typically no hard and fast rule as to how long documentation of safety audits should be maintained, a simple procedure is to maintain them for the same 3-year period as your training records. Accident investigations were discussed in a previous chapter, and some of the paperwork generated within an accident investigation was discussed at that time. Within any accident report, it is essential to document the date of the accident, the municipality, including the state in which the accident occurred, the driver's name, assuming the accident was traffic-related, the name of the person or persons injured, any fatalities, either immediately at the time of the accident or within 30 days, and whether any hazardous materials were released. The length of time to maintain accident reports can vary anywhere from 1 to 7 years. In many cases, this duration is defined by the applicable statute of limitations law within your state as it relates to the time frame in which personal injury lawsuits must be filed after an accident occurs. Your insurance carrier could probably provide some guidance on how long to maintain accident and investigation reports. If your service has a robust and effective safety program, it should be holding regular safety meetings. Agendas and minutes from these meetings should be maintained to not only assist the committee in its work and to provide a level of transparency for the entire organization with regard to the Safety Committee's activities, but to also serve as proof of your service's safety activities to regulatory agencies and insurance companies. Be sure to document who attended the meetings along with any actions taken and outcomes as a result of the work completed by the committee. Some state regulatory agencies may have a requirement for how long these minutes and other related documentation should be maintained. In the absence of such guidance, a period of 3 years is suggested. Again, the impact of safety committees cannot be overstated, and a record of their activities is very important for future reference within the organization. Inspections and preventative maintenance efforts for your vehicles and equipment, including repairs and malfunctions, should be documented, and a record should be maintained during the life of the vehicle or piece of equipment. This includes work requests, maintenance logs, and other related documentation. If the vehicle or equipment is purchased used, any existing records should be received from the previous owner. If you sell a vehicle or piece of equipment, that documentation should be transferred to the new owner. Any failures of equipment or vehicles should be documented, along with the testing or repairs conducted to correct or fix the failure. The use of electronic asset tracking software can assist with these documentation needs. With regard to the initial scenario, some good resources to determine documentation requirements for your safety and health program include OSHA requirements, NFPA 1401, and any requirements mandated by state or other agencies. Additionally, when documenting training, be sure to document who, what, when, where, why, and how to generate a comprehensive picture of the training. If a regulatory agency, insurance company, or a subpoena ever requests your documentation, you want to make sure it is thorough and adequately represents your service's commitment to the safety and health of its employees and the public they serve. Given your completion of this module, you should now be able to identify essential records that document your EMS organization's activities, list the 5 steps of the OSHA record-keeping system, describe the privacy concerns related to injury and illness record-keeping, define the period of time for which you must retain employee medical records, list the components that must be recorded and maintained in the medical record of a member who has an occupational exposure to an infectious disease, develop a training record with all required information, describe what constitutes a collision for the purposes of accident reporting, and describe the elements that should be included on an equipment maintenance log.